introduction, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world listening in, or if you're listening in later on. It's a little bit early here in sunny Sydney, Australia, but I'm really pleased to join you all. And as Jerry said, I'm Alistair. I'm one of the heads of design here at Atlassian. I head up design for Stride, Confluence, and our platform business. And I'm here to give you a little bit of a story behind the growth of our design team. Just a little over 4 years ago, there was only 6 designers here at Atlassian, and there's now closing in on 200, although the title of the presentation is to 126. As I said, I'm going to give you a little bit of a behind the scenes look into how we've scaled that team and some of the hard lessons that we've learned along the way. Now, full disclosure, I wasn't one of the original 6, but I've been here quite a while, close to the start. And with that, I want to start with a story of my own, and that story kind of unpacks itself into a statement, which is consultants are a service to a client, and I call that a truism, and that may be a slightly obvious statement, but prior to Atlassian, I was actually a consultant here in Sydney, and I consulted to various multinationals here in Sydney as well as in Southeast Asia, and ultimately, when I went in and embedded with those clients, even if I went and spent weeks or months on end with them in their offices, I was ultimately a paid service to that client. The client was ultimately in control. And so, as a designer, if I drew a really, really high level mental model of what that looked like, you had the client on the inside and then the consultant on the outside. And so the client was obviously controlling all of the work that was going on, and I was a paid service to that client. And so what I would actually see as well when I went into these teams was that often the design team internally within those clients was also a service to product teams. And so often the design team would report up to engineering or product management. And often that design team may have been a single UX designer of one, sitting in a corner, and they would get requirements from the product and engineering teams, and then they would create mocks and then pass them back to the product teams, and that was their work done. And so again, if I drew a really high level mental model of what that looks like, so you have product management and engineering on one side, and you have design on the other, and design is ultimately there, a service, and they have no ownership over what they were building or why they were building it. And so a number of years ago, this was essentially what it looked like at Atlassian, but it doesn't look like that today. And when I was moving from that consultancy role, I was interviewing at Atlassian. I met the head of design, Jürgen Spangl, and he drew on a whiteboard during one of my interviews. He drew this, what we call the triad model here at Atlassian, where you have product management, engineering, and design all working together as an integrated team, pulling in the same direction, trying to build the right thing for customers. And he went a step further and he said that Atlassian wanted to become an experience-led company. And this isn't a design-led company. This isn't design calling all the shots. This is the triad, making sure that we're building the right experiences for our customers. And I was really intrigued by this during the interview process, having seen what I'd seen as a consultant. And during that interview, Jürgen kind of went a little bit further. He swore at me a little bit. I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but he says, "I really don't care." He said, "If the experience is not right, you should stop the release. You should stop the product going out to customers." And really what that quote he was showing was, he was showing the expectation that he had of a designer and of the design teams that worked for him. He wanted them to stand up and ship really great, really awesome experiences for our customers. And if we didn't feel as a designer or as a team that the experience was right, we should put our hands up and say that. And so I can't see you all, obviously, but many of you may be nodding along and saying, "That's awesome. You guys at Atlassian now have a seat at the table." You may be agreeing with me that this is exactly kind of what we need. Well, for me, it's actually nothing to do with sitting at tables. There's no metaphorical table that we pretend to sit at. It's not about wielding the same influence as different disciplines. It's actually about the value that your company places on design and on experience. That's the key thing here. And so what you're trying to do really is you're actually trying to change the entire company culture that you're working in. So you're trying to go from design being in its own department, sitting in a corner, And you're trying to actually spread design thinking and experience-led thinking throughout your organization. And that's really hard. That is a really, really hard task to do. And many of you, when you became designers, there's obviously many designers listening in, you maybe thought that you were just going to be the designer of products. Now, for me, your role is actually to be the designer of the company that you're working in. And you want to work for a company that you're proud of and that ships experience-led experiences for your customers. And so, and again, that is really, really hard thing to do. And what I want to talk to you about today is kind of 5 hard lessons that we've learned as we've been on this journey at Atlassian, and we're still on this journey. You know, we certainly haven't reached the end, and we're still on that journey. But I want to talk to you about some of those hard lessons, and then some of the takeaways of how we've set up our design teams here at Atlassian for success. And I'm going to use a format where I'll have a lesson, and then at the end of that section, I'll have a takeaway. And so the first lesson that I've got is a kind of quote. So you can have the best design team in the world, but if your organization doesn't truly value design, it really doesn't matter. And looking back and reflecting on when I was a consultant, I had some of the best designers working for me that I've ever worked with. And yet we couldn't really impact amazing change at the companies that we worked at. And why was that? They were telling us they wanted to be customer centric. They were telling us they wanted to be experience led, but they really weren't set up to make that change and to make that leap. And I'll share a story. So Atlassian was proudly founded by 2 engineers. This is a picture of Scott and Mike back in 2000, I think it's about 2002 when the company was founded. And we didn't employ our first designer until 2008. Mike was essentially our first designer for many years, working in Photoshop and Fireworks. We didn't employ our first designer until 2008. And at the time, design reported up to engineering. And then from 2008 to 2012, design grew from 1 to 6 people in 4 years. And so that was at a time when engineering was experiencing double-digit growth, product management was experiencing double-digit growth, and the company was booming. But why did we only hire 6 designers? And you have to look at the value that Atlassian placed on design at the time. And so Atlassian had then and still has today an awesome tradition of founder reviews. So where teams will go up and they will present their work to the founders to get feedback on the work that they're doing. And often in those founder reviews back in the day, this was the type of feedback that they would get. Why is the button placed over there? And so the feedback was at the wrong level. So design was being spoken about at the wrong level. The feedback was actually on the wrong things. It was on UI and placement of elements. And so it was really difficult for design to have really meaningful conversations. And designers at the time were often becoming quite frustrated. And so this presentation would be kind of a miss if I didn't mention and acknowledge Jürgen Spangl, who is our current head of design. And we hired him in 2011. And he's had to work really hard to give design a really strong voice at Atlassian. And he's done a number of different things to actually achieve that. And one of the things that I'll talk about is I use this quote from Don Draper. I'm a big Mad Men fan, if there's any Mad Men fans out there. And he says, if you don't like what is being said, then change the conversation. And that's exactly what Jürgen had to do. He had to elevate the practice of design from the level of pushing pixels around to a much more organizational level. And he wanted us to fight for the right things for our customers. And so how did he do that? And so we'll look at a couple of different projects. So when you're a fast-moving tech company, you're growing really fast, you're shipping really fast, that's great for customers, and that's great for you. But oftentimes, development can be duplicated. So what I've got building on the slide is some of the 44 different drop-down menu styles that were live in our products about 6 or 7 years ago. So 44. You might think that that's ridiculous, right? You've got to think from a customer point of view, the cognitive load that they have to go through to understand all of these different things, do pretty much the same thing. So it's really terrible for customers. But also from an engineering point of view, we've had to build and code these things 44 different times. And so it wasn't just little components. So this is a screenshot of Jira from back in around 2010, 2011. And if I call your attention to the logo in the top left, the dark blue bar, the light blue bar underneath with the tabbed area, and then you've got the gray content background or gray background, and then the white content sitting on that. And then this is Confluence, our other flagship product at the time. You'll notice that it's got a totally different header. The header is actually contained within the content area. There's no logo. So I'll pull them in side by side. They're visually extremely different, except for the enterprise kind of blue. And they were our two flagship products at the time, and yet they could have come from two very separate companies, could have built these products. And so the first thing that Jürgen did was he pushed through the first version of the Atlassian design guidelines, or our ADG. And this standardized all of the components and the headers across all of our products. Now, you might be thinking that this was a no-brainer. We've got 44 different styles of drop-down across our sites. The headers look really different. So this is obviously what we would do. But it was really unpopular at the time. Back in 2012, this was a really unpopular decision. And why? There wasn't a single customer who was asking us to make our drop-down styles consistent or to make our headers consistent. This wasn't a popular piece of customer feedback. And by pushing engineers into integrating the design guidelines into our products, that was taking engineering firepower away from actually building customer-voted features. And so this was a relatively unpopular decision, but Jürgen essentially bet his job on this. He really pushed hard for this because he had a strong belief that this was the right thing to do in the long run, and the founders backed him. And once we released, we started getting really positive customer feedback. So things like great work on the ADG and the improvements I've been seeing in the last few updates of Jira is awesome. So this is from Robert Binning, one of our customers. We had our product and customer advocates giving us positive feedback from customers about the consistency they were now seeing across experiences. And importantly, key product metrics improved. But it wasn't just our external customers that were happier. So it meant that internally, we could go much faster because we could go from these really rough whiteboard sketches to existing patterns in our library, design library, into code. And so sprints got measurably faster at the time, and engineers were much, much happier building products using the Atlassian design guidelines. And so going back to those founder reviews, the conversation changed to how do we scale design faster? And so if you remember from 2008 to 2012, we went from 1 to 6 designers at Atlassian. From 2012 to 2016, we went to over 100 in just 4 years. And Jürgen had a clear mandate to grow and scale design at Atlassian. And importantly, Jürgen went from reporting into the engineering team into reporting into the CEO. And again, I just re-emphasize, this is not now about sitting at a metaphorical table. It is actually about the value that the company is placing on design now. And so there's this really lovely quote from Julie Zhu, who I'm sure you all know. She's a VP of design at Facebook. And she says, if you don't want design to be treated as a service, you need to have an opinion about what problems are worth solving and why. And that's the key. It's not about sitting at tables. It's about having an opinion about the problems that are worth solving and why. And with the example of the ADG, Jürgen had a strong opinion about that and really fought hard to push that through. And so the takeaway from this section is, and I'm paraphrasing a quote from John Maeda. He says, design is not a magical switch that gets turned on inside a company. It's a conscious effort on behalf of the CEO and the executive team, and I would include you all as designers, to make design matter. You're designing the company to make them value design. You are change agents in there, and that's super important. So the second lesson that I've got is a quote from Jason Damar of Pixar fame, and I really love this quote, and we use this a lot internally. He says, pain is temporary, suck is forever. And it's a really great quote. And as a designer, when you're putting work up for critique and feedback, you're putting a little bit of your soul up there. Like, every time, I do believe that you're putting a little bit of your soul up there to be critiqued, and that's painful when you get feedback. Certainly negative feedback or positive feedback, but certainly sometimes that's painful. But the opposite, if you actually don't go through that process, you can actually impact your customers' lives for a long time, or potentially for forever, if you don't go through that short-term pain. And so, to kind of illustrate that, I've got an example from Atlassian where we shipped this thing called the App Switcher many years ago. We did it really, really quickly. The problem that we were trying to solve was customers who had multiple products and multiple instances of our products. We wanted them to be able to get around those different products really quickly. And so, on face value, this was a really great idea. So if I draw your attention to the App Switcher menu, the hamburger menu in the top left, you'll see that as you hover over it, or maybe the video is not going to work. Well, maybe the video won't work in here. But as you hover over it, you get a really long drop-down list. And that drop-down list really didn't scale that quickly, really didn't scale that well. And so what we learned was that was actually a really, really difficult, here we go. It was actually a really, really difficult decision to reverse. And so that's actually lived a long time in our products because we did that really quickly. We shipped it really quickly. On face value, it was a good idea, but we didn't really think through the scaling issues that we were going to experience there. And that decision has restricted designers and product managers ever since. And so, on a really kind of micro level, on a team by team basis, we needed a way to give we needed better processes to give design feedback to our teams. And our teams are inclusive of designers, product managers, and engineers. And we created this process called design sparring. And I'm often asked about the word sparring, but sparring is based off of an art critique. That's what we want to do, is we want to critique the work. And the key thing, if you look at the history of sparring is not about winning. It's about actually learning and actually evolving your work and your process and your design through a peer review feedback. And so that's what we use design sparring for. And it's key thing here for us is that it's about learning and not winning. And so sparring, we started to structure our approach across the different teams that we had as we scaled. And so we were design-led. So designers facilitate all of the design sparring sessions. It's structured, so we record decisions internally. We have a design decision document that many teams use to record decisions. We're inclusive. It's not just the designers that attend. So it's also product managers, engineers, QA, customer advocates. If they want to, they can attend. And the key for us, and it's also regular, so it happens every week. Some teams spar every day, some teams spar every 2 weeks, but it's regular, on a regular cadence. And the key for us was at a very micro level, on a team-by-team basis. We wanted to get all of the key disciplines involved in the design process and make sure that they had a way to input into what was going live. So that was great on a micro level, on a team-by-team basis. But we needed something at a much larger macro scale. And if you think about design, to many non-designers, design is this black box. It's this mythical kind of process. I've actually got my parents over from England. They're in Australia visiting myself and my family at the moment. And even though they know I'm a designer, they still continually ask me if I work in IT. And so it's just this mythical process to many non-designers. They're like, what do designers really do? And so what we wanted to do at Atlassian was we wanted to codify our design process across the organization. And we wanted to debunk that myth so that every team could make better design decisions. And so what we started to do is we started to visualize the frameworks that we used in design. And we started to visualize our design process, our kind of end-to-end process across the company. And we shared this openly on our internal intranet. And the key thing for us here was not to prescribe exactly how to do design in inverted commas. We wanted to show the teams that we were working with and collaborating with where we were going to take them before we took them there. Because if they understand where they're going, then they're going to be much more comfortable in contributing to that process. And so we visualized and shared that, and we've got three key stages around envisioning. So are you envisioning something brand new? Are you making something, so you're actually shipping something to production? Or are you improving an existing feature or experience? And it's a totally collaborative process. There's no real design-only phase in here. Everything is designed to be fully collaborative with the disciplines that we work with. And I'll just zoom in to one of the phases that we have in here, just to take a little bit of a deeper dive on it. Now, the process, as I said, it's a framework, really. I prefer the word framework because nothing is fully prescribed in here. There's things that we highly encourage every team to do. For example, you can see something there that says do the experience canvas. We encourage every team to do that because that's a single page that gives every team a shared understanding of the problem they're solving, the hypotheses that they have, the data points that they already have, and what they believe is going to happen. And so that's a great way to get the full team on board and get a great shared understanding when you're starting a project. But then we don't want to take away the creativity from the team. So you can see something there that says generate ideas. There's 20 or 30 different plays that we call them that teams can use if they want. And it's up to them to choose which is the right thing for the stage of the project that they're up. And so we wanted to give enough guidance for our teams to scale, but not enough to take away their creativity. And so those plays that I mentioned, in things like the experience canvas or generating ideas, a play is essentially for us a step-by-step guide on how to run, say, an experience canvas session. And it'll be an hour and a half. This is how you run a specific session. And so the key for us was that we wanted to share those plays company-wide so that anybody could run them. They weren't the exclusive domain of designers. We wanted every team, every discipline, product management, QA, engineering, to be able to run any of these sessions. And so we shared those as plays company-wide. Initially, internally, there were about 50 or 60 of them. And then we've actually shared those externally. So you can actually go to the Atlassian team playbook. If you just Google that, you'll find that our team playbook. And I think there's about 30 or 40 plays online that you can actually go and use. And many of the teams, pretty much every team at Atlassian, will use many of the different plays that you find in that playbook in their day-to-day lives at Atlassian. And so once we'd shared those, we realized that there was a need to educate teams on how to run them. Even though they had a step-by-step guide, it was always great to get some education going and teach them how to run those sessions better. And so we also kicked off boot camps. So there's boot camps that run pretty much every week, and those boot camps show people how they can run, say, an experience canvas session, a health monitor, and they're just run by internal team members. And so again, it gave us a baseline to codify how we worked across Atlassian, and we can continually improve and iterate on that, which we consistently do. And so the second takeaway I've got is codify design across your organization. You've got to if you want to set your teams up for success, you have to debunk that black box myth to approach to design. You need to show other non-design disciplines where you're going to take them before you take them there. So codify it, share it, iterate on it, and make everybody comfortable with the process and the frameworks that you're going to use with them. The third lesson that I've got is a quote from one of my favorite comedians, John Cleese. It says, "I've several times made a poor choice by avoiding unnecessary confrontation." And avoiding confrontation is actually, it's the easy path, right? Many of us do that because it's easier. It's not nice to have difficult conversations, but I'm here to tell you that you shouldn't. You definitely shouldn't avoid those tough conversations, because those tough conversations can help build trust and help you go faster as you scale. And so one of the frameworks that we use internally is this framework from Kim Scott called Radical Candor. And Radical Candor is about creating these kind of bullshit-free zones with your teams where they feel encouraged and empowered to give you direct feedback, and you're giving them open and direct feedback. And if you think about it, it's actually quite rare that a manager will tell you that you're screwing up. Maybe you only get that in your annual performance review. That's the one time of year that you get any feedback. And that's really not that useful if it's 6 or 9 months after the actual event. You need it in the moment. And I'll share a personal story here. When I joined Atlassian, in my, I think it was my 4th or 5th week, I was asked to speak at a company all-staff meeting. Now, that was, at the time, there was about 700 people, I think, here in Sydney. And I was asked to speak, and that's obviously that was the biggest crowd I'd ever spoken to. I was quite nervous. I was new to the company. And I got up, spoke, did my 10 minutes, and then finished and got through and was pretty pleased with how it went. And then immediately afterwards, a gentleman by the name of Don Price, who's our head of R&D here at Atlassian, he came up to me, and he's a big, burly Northern English chap, and he said, "Well done, Alistair. You spoke really well." And I said, "Thank you. Awesome." And he said, "I'm not sure if you noticed, though, but you were standing on one spot. You didn't move, and you were gently rocking back and forth, just in the one spot." And I said, "Oh." And he said, and it was quite distracting, just standing there. He said, "Think about your stage presence and how you walk around on stage." And initially, I was really embarrassed to get that quite direct feedback. But I said, "Thank you." And as I reflected on it, I was really appreciative that he was candid with me, that he gave me feedback in the moment, because it showed that he cared. He wanted me to improve. He'd seen something that I could do better at. And to this day, when I speak on stages, I never stand in one spot and rock back and forth. I generally tend to walk around the stage. So it's helped me improve in a positive way. And that's a great example of being radically candid. And so I'm not going to go into the full framework here. You can Google it. I just want to give you the introduction to it. But if you imagine a vertical axis of caring personally, a horizontal axis of challenging directly, and where you want your feedback to be is in the top right. That's where radical candor is, because you're showing your team that you care personally about them, but you want to challenge them directly. You want them to improve and get better. And so how do we do that at Atlassian? So how do we actually practice radical candor? And so we have, at Atlassian, we have something called the skills matrix. And the skills matrix is something for the designers, and it's split up into 3 themes. Those themes are craft, driving for outcome, and leadership. And within those 3 key themes, we have different competencies. And I've got just 3 examples. There's about 20 all up, these competencies. And so in craft, for example, you've got interaction and UI design. In driving for outcome, you've got process. And then in leadership, you have facilitation and collaboration. They're just 3 examples. And so when you join, after a couple of months, we ask you to fill out your skills matrix and rate yourself on each competency from a scale of 1 to 5. And that 1 means I've never done this before. I have no idea what this is. And 5 means I'm a Jedi Master. I could go and teach this to anybody that came into the building. And so we then get the manager of that person to also assess that individual after they've been here a little while, and then come together and review together. And that is a really, that can be quite a tough conversation, because maybe the individual has rated themselves a 5 or a 4 on something, and the manager has graded them a 2 or a 3. And so there's a difference there. And that can be an awkward conversation. But it's a really open and candid conversation. And what it does is it helps the manager and the employee understand and get a shared understanding of the areas that the employee wants to learn, because maybe they've only self-rated a 1 or a 2 in different areas, and they actually want to get better in those areas. So we can start creating open career development plans for them, or areas where they don't agree. But you can have that open conversation at that time and work on a plan to make sure you're moving that situation forward. And so that's one example of how we practice radical candor here at Atlassian. And so that takeaway for that section is show your team that you care. So practice radical candor with them, because if you're open and honest, if you're direct with your team in the right way, then it will help you build trust. And as you scale, it will help you grow your team faster and actually ship better products to your customers, which is super hard. And so the 4th lesson that I've got, and this is probably one of the most practical sections of the talk, I would say. And I've got a quote from John Lennon, one of my favorite artists. It says, "Rituals are important. Nowadays, it is hip not to be married. I'm not interested in being hip." And oftentimes team rituals can get glossed over, that's why I use this quote, is that people can gloss over these things and we don't need to do critique, or we don't need to do these things. And of course you don't want to over process everything, but creating strong rituals helps your team create a culture of team, and a team chemistry, and a culture of trust within your team. And it also sets the expectations of what you expect from your design team and amongst your team. And so one of the things that we use at Atlassian is we use this framework called Shuhari. This is from Aikido, and it's a system to take you from novice to master. And along that journey of going from novice to master, you have there's a learning curve there, and knowing where you're at on that curve is actually really helpful. And so when you actually break this framework down, Shuhari, Shu means to learn something, Ha means to practice that thing that you've learned, and then Ri means to master. And so that we use this framework, we translate that framework into something that we call a 90-day plan. And so if you think about when you started at your last job, you were probably given your laptop, you were probably told where the shared folder was, or where your cloud drive was, and you were then told, here's the project you're working on. And that's not a great introduction on how to set people up for success as they walk into your business. And so we use these 90-day plans to give an individual a really in-depth look into their first 90 days and try and set them up for success as they walk into the building. And so these 90-day plans are really quite in-depth. I've just scrolled down a little bit of there, and you can see the day 30 check-in, the day 60 check-in, the day 90 check-in. And so the important thing for our plans is that they give an individual coming in clear deliverables and expectations for their 30, 60, and 90-day check-ins and milestones. They also have information on there, though, about company and team history, so that they don't have to go and dig for that. We spend some time pulling that together into a single place. We give them examples of who to go and meet and greet. We give them links to, again, company history, the project that they're working on, so they don't have to go and dig, and also just how to get set up at Atlassian with our cloud drives, etc. And so this is a strong ritual that we have to help set up individuals as they come into the business and set them up for success. The second ritual I've got it's one of my favorite that came from the team, something that we affectionately call design detention. And if you think about today's modern office, productivity it's super hard, right? Like, you've got email, you've got a chat client, you've got your phone, you've got constant meetings, you're working on multiple projects. So how do you actually get work done? Especially as a designer or an engineer, as a craftsperson, you need to focus on the difficult problem that you've got in front of you. And you need focused kind of deep work time to do that. And that can be hard. And so in response to that, some designers came together and created design detention. And design detention takes a few different forms. It can be as short as an hour or as long as a day. But the key is that during that time, the team comes together in one space and they turn off chat, turn off email, decline all meetings, and the rest of their team knows where they are, but they know that that's their working time. And the day is largely unstructured. So it's not a structured day. An individual can go and sit together with their team and just put their headphones on and just start working, or they can go and collaborate together. But they know that they're going to be able to work together on a problem, or work in an individual space and have focused time on that problem. And that also, by coming together into the same physical location, it creates a bond within that team, and again helps build trust within that team. The third ritual that we have at Atlassian that I want to talk about is something called Design Week. And Design Week started in 2013, and it was about bringing the whole design team together for an individual week of learning and working together. And this was in the photo that I've got in there. That was the design team in 2013. It was pretty small. Then this is the design team in 2014. You can see we kind of doubled in size. We had some remote people on video conference in the background. There's Joel. And then this is 2015. So you can see there's about 55 of us here. And then this is 2016. There's just over 100. And then this is 2017. This is this year. So it was about 150 in this photo. And I don't show these photos to show the scale of the growth. That's not really what it is. It's the people that are in all of these photos, because Design Week has become a cultural tradition for the whole of the design team, because we fly in every designer that works for us from around the world. So from Austin, Gdansk, San Francisco, Mountain View, they'll all come into Sydney for a week. And they will learn and work together with their peers from across the world. And that allows them to build relationships and bonds with people that they may have only met over chat, or they may have only met via our internal Confluence instance. And that is priceless for us to be able to come together as a team once a year. And as a design manager, as a head of design here, we budget for that every single year because we strongly believe that it's such an important tradition for our team. And so it's become this great cultural tradition that everybody in the design team looks forward to every year. And so that fourth takeaway I've got is, whatever they are, it doesn't really matter what rituals you use. There's many, many different rituals out there, but make sure you put a few in place, not too many, but a few in place to foster a culture of trust and a sense of team. Because as you scale, you want to set up new team members for success, and you want to help build bonds between them so that they can collaborate together on projects. And so the last lesson that I have, I've borrowed a tweet from a colleague of mine, Maddie Schreck. He says UXers, and when he says UXers, he's referring to more traditional information architects or people who are stronger in kind of UX design. He says, your problem is not solved just because you arrived at a conceptual diagram. You might have to ask an interface designer for help. And he tweeted that a little while ago. And I think for me, it's a perfect way to illustrate some of the hiring lessons that we've had at Atlassian. And I'm not going to talk about the hiring lessons in terms of hiring generalists or hiring people who are stronger in visual design or people who are stronger in UX design. That's not really what's important in this piece. It's about, when you hire, you want to really value people, or value the design craft. So people who are makers, people who are tinkerers, people who are doers, those people who are strong craftspeople in whichever craft that whichever part of the design discipline that they're strongest in. And so how do we actually reinforce that? We want to hire for that, but how do we reinforce that here? And so if you look at a traditional career path, for a designer, most organizations, you'll start as a graduate designer, and then you become a designer, a senior designer. Maybe you then take the step into management as a team lead or a manager, and then you become a head of design. Now, has anybody really stopped to say why, like, we force people to become people managers? I mean, not everybody wants to become a people manager. And so at Atlassian, we have a twin track of craft and people leadership. And the craft track is certainly evolving, but it's something that we're committed to because we want to value those craftspeople. We also want to give people the opportunity to move into management if they want to, but we want to value the craftspeople and give them an opportunity to continually progress their career in craft if they don't want to go into management. And if you think about it, when you move into people onto the management track and people leadership, you're really swapping product problems, concentrating on product problems as a designer, to concentrating on people problems and people opportunities. And that's okay, but individuals in your team should do the type of work that is most fulfilling to them, but is also most valuable to the company. And so as an individual contributor or a craftsperson, you're just as valuable as a manager in our eyes. And we need to encourage both of those, both tracks. And so that leads into, we don't just want to value the craft of the craftspeople, we want to value the management craft as well. We seek out and hire strong managers. Now, why? We hire strong managers or promote managers from within because as a growing company, as Atlassian is, there's a high rate of change, there's a lot of ambiguity, and we need strong craftspeople, but also strong managers to provide clear direction and for managers to be an umbrella for the team in the right place at the right time to help shelter the craftspeople and the people in their team to do the best work of their lives. And so that's why we want to value both tracks equally. And so the fifth takeaway is to really value that craft of design and management by defining clear career paths for both. The worst thing that could happen in your organization is that you could lose an amazing craftsperson who doesn't want to move into people management because they've hit a ceiling, because they have nowhere else to go. And you need to make sure that you're allowing room to grow for both types of individuals. And so that was kind of the end of my 5 lessons. And I want to wrap up a little bit, but to wrap up, I want to take it kind of back to the start. So design is growing up. It's an integral part of many businesses now. Everybody's hiring designers. Design and design thinking and experience-driven development is not a fad, but you've got to set your teams up for success. And so if you go back to where I started, where design was a service, your job as a designer was pretty much done once you'd thrown some mock-ups over the wall, once you'd thrown a few comps over. But as you move into integrated design or working in a triad group, which I hope most of you are, you become much more responsible and much more accountable for the outcomes. And we need to be ready for that. And so the key for any great team, to set up any great team, is that they're clear on their charter. They understand what they're responsible and what they're accountable for. And so as a designer, as we move into this world where we can start having bigger impacts on the businesses that we work for, you have to be careful what you wish for here, because it's not an easy path. And I've got a couple of quotes. And so at some point, your boss is going to ask you, or your CEO or a key stakeholder or your client, what is design actually accountable for? And you need to have, in my opinion, a stronger answer than the user experience, because user experience is impacted by the speed or the performance of the application or the website that you're working on. But you don't control that as a designer. That's controlled by the engineering team. And so it's not an option to just say, we own the user experience. And there's this great quote by Peter Merholtz and Kristen Skinner, this is from their book, Org Design for Design Orgs. They say, if designers shield themselves in the cloak of creatives as a way not to engage with the business, they will lose impact and credibility. Designers need to understand how their work contributes to business success. And I think that's key, in that understanding, as we start to have more impact as designers on the businesses that we work for, we have to actually engage with the measures of success that the business has. And so how are we starting to do that at Atlassian? We're starting to become accountable for specific metrics. And we use a couple of metrics at Atlassian at a company level. So Net Promoter Score, which is how customers feel about our products and services, and monthly active usage. And so we recognize, though, that these are very large, they're quite blunt metrics, but they are the language as an overarching goal that we're kind of striving to improve. But from a team perspective, we then take Net Promoter Score and we break that down into something called the RUF framework. So we break the comments from Net Promoter Score down into reliability, usability, and functionality. And that then allows us to segment that a little deeper and actually go a bit deeper on the themes that we're seeing from our customer feedback. We can then translate that to teams. So RUF as a framework, reliability is how performant is the product, that's engineering. So are we getting lots of comments about the performance? Usability, how do customers feel about the usability of our products? That directly translates to design. And then functionality, so are we building the right things for our customers? What those individual teams do is then they break down those themes into key leading metrics that they believe will go back and impact positively Net Promoter Score. So as an example, for engineering, a leading metric may be something like AppDex, so how fast your web pages load. In design, we have multiple different leading metrics, and we start putting those into scorecards for the different things that we're actually designing. And so some examples of what leading metrics can be, and these could be many, many more. This is just a few. So time to task, are people converting? Do they have a preference for a specific design? Is the design more visually complex? And what we can actually then do is we can then measure against a baseline. So our existing design, we can get a leading metric for or measure for each of those metrics. And then we can baseline against the design that we're proposing. And then we can clearly show, and we often as well, do that against competitors, we can clearly show what we're accountable for within the business and how we're improving key metrics across the designs that we're producing. And then we're not looking for a clear winner in any of these leading metrics. We're looking to triangulate key metrics so that we can be data informed and just not data driven. And then these leading metrics, they then circle back up and actually influence positively, we hope, obviously, the key metrics that we have as a business of monthly active usage and net promoter score. But the key thing for all of this is that the triad as a group are all accountable for key things, and they're all pulling, though, in the same direction, trying to impact key metrics for the business of active usage and do customers love using our products. And so I'm going to end on saying, are you all ready? Because scaling a design team is actually quite easy. Just putting some job ads up, running some interviews, hiring, and that's actually relatively easy. But actually making design matter within your organization, that is actually really hard. And I'd encourage you all, as designers, you are all change agents within your organization to design the company, the type of company that you want to work for. But you need to be acutely aware of what that means in today's world. And so thank you very much for listening. And I think there's probably some questions. Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me dive into some of these questions here. So let's see, we've got some fantastic questions. And as we actually get into the questions, we will run a poll here as well. Here we go. Let me go ahead and pull that up.
Do you need me to stop sharing, Jerry?
No, we're good. We're good.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Go ahead and I've gotten some really good positive feedback so far.
Perfect.
And, all right. So of course, folks, if this design process looks like something that you want to be a part of, as we mentioned in the beginning, Atlassian is actually hiring in the Sydney as well as in the Mountain View office. So as I mentioned before, they are our platinum sponsor for this event. As you've seen here, the Atlassian design team is pretty focused on building powerful experiences for Jira, Confluence, Bitbucket, and across all the Atlassian products. So I'm going to drop again another link here to the website there, and you can see all of the openings they have. Who knows? Maybe you'll get to work directly with Alistair on.
I am hiring in Mountain View.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive into these questions here. So, so one quick logistical question. Someone was wondering, how does Atlassian manage internal communications? Is it mostly through email, or what other approach do you use?
I mean, all of Atlassian's, we have a belief of open by default. So all of our products are open by default. And we believe that openness encourages teams to work together more collaboratively and build amazing things, whatever they're building for their customers. And how that manifests itself at Atlassian is, I was pleasantly surprised when I joined. I pretty much didn't get hardly any email, like direct one-to-one email from anybody, because everything happens via our internal Confluence instance. So we have a large Confluence instance, which acts as our internal intranet. And Atlassian individuals publish about 30 or 40 blog posts per day across the organization. So they're blog posts sharing things like team successes, team project updates, tips and techniques of what things that have worked and things that maybe have not worked on their projects. So everything happens openly via things like blog posts, and then people creating pages for their projects. And so that all happens. That's how pretty much everything is shared. And then you'll get mentioned on a page, or you'll get shared a link in Stride. And that's pretty much how the company works. And as I said, I was super pleasantly surprised when I joined that I didn't get any email, which was super nice.
Gotcha. And the next question we have here is regarding career development. So someone was wondering, regarding the craft and management tracks, have you encountered people who perceive themselves as in the wrong track? And if so, how do you help steer them into a track that fits them the best?
To be honest, I mean, it's we encourage those open conversations between managers and employees. It's something that we're continually trying to improve. We're about to, like, we've got a learning development team here who are constantly giving us tools and frameworks to use with our teams. So it's an area of development for us. But we have a lot of cases of people who have become managers and they've chosen to go back to the individual contributor track, and we are totally fine with that. Like that, for us, switching between tracks is totally fine. We want to encourage people to, as I said, to do the work that is most important for them and most valuable for the business. And so if people feel they've tried out management and they thought that it was going to be the track for them, but they decide that it's not the track for them, moving back to the craft track is totally fine. They'll just have different expectations of them within that craft track. They'll be doing different things. And so they'll just need to deliver on those expectations. But it's totally fine to move between tracks here at Atlassian. And we have literally dozens of examples of people in engineering moving from development managers back to architect roles, and in design moving from team lead and manager roles back to IC roles. And it's pretty successful.
Gotcha. The next question that we have is, let's see here. So this is actually a really relevant question, which is, was there any challenge in persuading your founders to see design as integral to product development? How did design kind of achieve its valued status today?
I think through showing, really, as I mentioned, like one of the first projects was releasing the design guidelines, and Jürgen was backed by the founders in releasing that. But as I said, it wasn't necessarily a popular decision because there weren't customers asking for consistency. So showing, though, the impact that design can have, that's been the most critical thing to actually show, to actually help get design or give design a great standing within the organization. And you need a strong leader to do that, and we're very fortunate to have Jürgen in that regards, because there will constantly be questions and pushback, and as we start to evolve what's design accountable for, that's a tough topic that we're talking about a lot right now. But yeah, yes, there were challenges in getting founder buy-in, but they backed Jürgen. They believed in him. And as I said, he had key projects like the Atlassian design guidelines. There was a couple of other big internal customer-focused projects on getting closer to our customers that delivered real impact to the business. And you could see that impact measurably. They were the key drivers for making sure that design had a strong voice here within Atlassian.
Got it. For these design detention sessions, do folks ever join those remotely, or are those held all co-located?
Yeah, so the remote one is a challenge. I mean, I manage a team across 3 locations and 3 time zones in Austin, San Francisco, and Sydney. Most teams are co-located together. If they're working together, they will all be in, say, Sydney. But some teams will work across different locations, and so individual teams will experiment on bringing remote workers into those sessions. Some of the teams they'll try experiment with different things. So they will leave on the Stride video throughout the whole design detention, even if the remote person is not there and they popped out for a snack. They will eat lunch or have coffee together remotely. Again, it's just trying to break down those barriers of saying, like, dropping off the call and just leaving it on permanently and actually sharing what happens in the physical location together with your remote workers. So they'll do things like that. But yes, people from remote do kind of dial into those sessions.
Gotcha. And the next question we have is more going back again to career development. So principal designers, are they responsible more for a mentorship role for lower level designers versus directly managing them?
Yeah, so that's something that we're constantly working on to evolve with our craftspeople to make sure we get that right. But yes, in a general sense, the principal, lead designers, and even some seniors are. I'm just going to have to move, Jerry, because I'm going to.
Yep, no worries.
Principal and lead designers are actually more accountable for things like mentoring. That's something that we advocate with them. Hang on, I'm just wrapping up something I have to come and get to. Hopefully you can still hear me.
Yep, hear you perfect.
So yeah, principal for mentoring and the quality of craft from the team, and the team leads and managers are more accountable for actually career development in a more traditional sense, and making sure that they're getting the support that they need in order to progress their career. So yeah, that's roughly the split at a very high level.
Gotcha. And let's take a look here. So we've got another question here. So someone was wondering if you could, would you say that the Atlassian organization structure, at least on the design team, is fairly flat, or is it pretty hierarchical and sort of tiered based on?
Yeah, I mean, as we've grown, we have some more. We have more tiers within the structure, but we don't want to create unnecessary hierarchy. But we do have levels, as you saw in the career chart. So we have heads of design. For a head of design for myself, I have design managers and team leads that work for me. But we try and keep it as flat as we can. But as we've scaled and with so many people in the design org, we have to include some hierarchy now.
Yep. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then we've got, let's see. All right. So this is an interesting question. How do you deal, or how is this maybe handled at Atlassian, where if there's multiple product owners or managers, or even just a product manager who's asking for their particular feedback to be implemented into a design? For instance, in some companies, there may be a rule that design has the final say and can veto other decisions. I'm not sure how that decision-making process is governed at Atlassian. Is there some formal thing where design has the final say? Is it more organic and there just seems to be an understanding and working relationship between PMs and designers?
Yeah, I mean, it generally skews to the latter. So we expect the triad of design, product, and engineering to make the right trade-offs for the decision and the situation that they find themselves in. So it's very difficult to give a very definitive answer sometimes because you don't know the different trade-offs that team has to make. If there is conflict, which does occasionally happen, it's key to set out, or who is the actual approver of that decision, and whether we need to go something like a formal, like a DAISY, like a DAISY framework for driver, approver, contributors, and informed. But generally, we skew more towards the organic. And again, if there is conflict, the team may run a play from the playbook, like the roles and responsibilities play, to make sure it's clear who's responsible and accountable for the decision that team has to make.
But as I said, the general rule of thumb that I go back to is making the triad as a group accountable, that they're comfortable with all the trade-off decisions that they've made. And if, as I said, if a designer feels really strongly that the trade-offs are wrong, then they need to stand up for that, and they need to push with a strong rationale and reasoning why they believe that they need to make different trade-offs as a group.
Right, right. And the last question that we'll take, because we're coming up on the hour, is going to be around, again, structure of the design team. So you spoke about the design team and how the 3 different circles shows designers integrated into product development. Would you say that design at Atlassian is still more of a service model, or is it far more embedded now to where there may be a centralized sort of service for design, but there's also that component of deeply embedded product teams?
So we kind of have both. That generally, though, designers are deeply embedded. We believe in that triad model of product, getting the right balance between business, end user, and technical. And so generally, all the designers are embedded within product teams. They sit with their product and engineering peers. They don't sit as a group of designers. They sit with their engineering and product peers. And so we strongly believe in that triad model. So it's far less a service in that regards. We do, though, however, one of the platform teams that I run, I have a design systems team who run our design guidelines. Now they're much more a group of designers building components for our product teams as a service, and our internal customers are one of our key customers. But we do also believe that the customer is at the heart of everything. And so even if you're just building a design system, you're building a design system to aid your internal and your external customers, to help them have a better life and experience with your products. And so even though that team is more of a service, we still have product management and engineering embedded with them. And we still believe that they need to focus on customer experience and building the right things for both our internal and our external customers.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that is actually the last question that we'll take. And on a closing note, I will again reiterate that if any of the processes or activities that Alistair was talking about resonated with you, Atlassian Design is actually hiring in their Mountain View as well as in their Sydney offices. And you can learn more about these open positions at www.atlassian.com/UXPin. And you can go there and check out their positions. Again, as you've seen here, it's a pretty mature design practice. So there's quite a bit of variety in roles, as well as teams and products that folks work on. And with that being said, thank you everybody for coming here today and coming with such great questions. Yeah, very relevant issues that folks pointed out here. And Alistair, yeah, great job with the presentation. Everyone has just been saying how much they enjoyed the advice, and it really resonated with folks.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for everyone listening in around the world.
Yeah, this was great. Yep, everybody, I'll see you at the rest of the sessions throughout the week through Friday. And yeah, for the recordings, we will send those out next week to everybody along with the decks. So, yep, see you guys all around, and take care for the rest of the evening.
Thanks.
All right, see ya.
Yeah.